just truthed out saying, quote, I have authorized a 90-day pause. The president here announcing a 90-day pause on tariffs, though it's not clear specifically which countries this pause is going to apply to. The Dow right now shooting up over 2,000 points. Look at that as this announcement comes through, a giant spike in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. This is important as part of the messaging around this post. The president saying that this is based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called the U.S. and try to work out deals with the administration and not try to retaliate for his tariffs. Notably, though, the president is raising the tariff applied to China from the United States to 125% effective immediately. So this pause applies to other countries, not China.
That's right, a 90-day pause on new tariffs except for China, which again goes to 125%, and the markets obviously ebullient they are as they are hearing this news. Let's go to Jeff Zeleny. He is live for us at the White House. This is what they had been hoping for, the markets. They actually kind of imagined it the other day and had a little bit of a jump into positive territory. But this is the announcement from the president, Jeff.
Well, Brianna, that was certainly a test run, but certainly not an intended one to see the markets go up when there was a false report of a pause. But now we are hearing from the president for the first time during this escalating trade war, saying that he is putting a 90-day pause. And you can just see to the right of our screen there what the markets are doing with this. From a policy standpoint, it is a bit more murky. The White House has not filled in any details of this, but we are getting this from the president on social media, as you were reading there, and he is explaining it as adding more to the China tariff pot, which is really growing day by day here, adding another tariff to China, even as he is praising the countries who he said have not retaliated. And those, of course, are the countries who are lining up to have discussions with the Treasury Secretary, with the White House, with the administration on trying to renegotiate. So the president is saying, and let me just read it to you here, he said, the countries who have not, at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the United States, I have authorized a 90-day pause and substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. So what this would seem to be, and again, we will have to fill in the blanks here, what this would seem to be taking all the countries back to that baseline 10%, if you will, which went into effect last Saturday for most countries, and then of course the reciprocal tariffs went into effect at midnight. So the president is putting a pause on those. Of course, this is adding to the policy uncertainty, but you can see what the market is doing. It's adding a bit of certainty to the market. So we're expected to see the president in the next hour here at the White House. We will see if he adds any meat on this bones here, but certainly a significant reaction from the White House. They've been reeling here, watching the financial markets really have a deep negative effect on this. The president has long said, at least during this period, he's not watched the markets. We know, of course, watching him for a long time, he does. And clearly this is something that he's been hearing from Republicans on Capitol Hill, Republican donors, really people who are supportive of his policies, saying it's time for an exit ramp. So that's what it looks like this will be, at least for now, a 90-day pause on those reciprocal tariffs. Boris and Brianna.
Jeff, please stand by. We've just learned that the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, will be speaking publicly soon. This also as we await to hear from President Trump. Markets, as you can see on your screen right now, are reacting very positively to this news. Let's bring in CNN's Matt Egan and Richard Quest. Richard, first to you, I wonder what you make of this announcement from the president, given the insistence from some folks in his administration that these tariffs were here to stay.
I think that there's a sort of duopoly of issues taking place. The first is the tariffs and the second is the execution. The tariffs themselves, the president still loves tariffs. So he's going to want to, in some shape or form, bring them back. This is his raison d'etre in terms of economic policy. But he's seen how damaging, and now he says he's got so many countries coming towards him, wanting to negotiate. He wants to give time for that to take place. It all begs the question, why, when they announced the reciprocal tariffs, didn't the president say they take effect in 90 days. You all have 90 days to negotiate. Why did it have to be done this way? To get to a result. Let's be clear, there is no more certainty about US trade policy now than there was half an hour ago than before this announcement. The only difference is that the sword of Damocles has it's actually been dropped, has now been lifted back up again, and so you're seeing the market. This is a relief rally. This is not back to the races. This is them saying the worst has not happened just yet. But it does not, and this I can't emphasize enough, it does not take us back to anything like the level of certainty that business seeks about what the US trade policy actually is.
Yeah, no, it's a stay of execution.
Yeah.
Richard Quest, hang with us if you will. I want to bring former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers back into the conversation. Larry, react to this news.
Look, this is a welcome development. What everyone has been saying is that the policies that are being pursued are very dangerous, that the truculence is catastrophic for economic interests because of the uncertainty that it generates. And we've seen a major retreat by the president from the truculence. It doesn't put the genie all the way back in the bottle. It doesn't eliminate all the uncertainty, but it's obviously a welcome step that we are backing away from major blunders, and the market is appropriately welcoming that step. But credibility is a thing where it takes a long time to build up and only a short time to lose, and we've lost a lot of it in the last few days. So this action, as welcome as it is, certainly doesn't leave our credibility completely restored. But I'm glad that we've had a demonstration that the president is able to listen. And I wonder whether the Secretary of the Treasury wants to reconsider his remarks about the Spain cutting its own throat in light of the president's prudent decision to back off. And hopefully we will now start listening to sense in the formulation of our policy. But this is a very welcome development, but no one should be confused. If anyone thought there was a carefully crafted, well-designed strategy behind what went on Liberation Day or since, this reversal, after all the statements that were made even earlier this morning, should remind people that we are engaged in dangerous rhetorical improvisation, not serious policymaking.
Larry, please stand by. You're seeing at the bottom of your screen a position in the White House grounds known as the Sticks, and it's essentially a live position where we are listening to Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, alongside Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Let's listen.
Trade plan, as you all know, the president just put out a statement announcing an additional tariff on China. The tariff on China will now go up to 125% because China imprudently decided to retaliate against the United States. And as I said at the podium yesterday, when you punch at the United States of America, President Trump is going to punch back harder. In that same vein, we have had more than 75 countries from around the world reach out to President Trump and his team here at the White House to negotiate better trade deals for the American worker. We have been overwhelmed with the amount of requests from countries around the world. I'll let the Secretary speak to that. We will continue with the tailor-made negotiations that I spoke about yesterday. In the meantime, there will be a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs as these negotiations are ongoing. and the tariff level will be brought down to a universal 10% tariff. The Secretary here has been a huge part of the President's trade team, of course, and will continue to lead these negotiations moving forward, to look out for the American worker, which is always President Trump's goal. So I'll kick it over to our great Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent.
Good, thank you. And we saw the successful negotiating strategy that President Trump implemented a week ago today. It has brought more than 75 countries forward to negotiate. It took great courage for him to stay the course until this moment. And what we have ended up with here, as I told everyone a week ago, they're in this very spot, do not retaliate, and you will be rewarded. So every country in the world who wants to come and negotiate, we are willing to hear you. We're going to go down to a 10% baseline tariff for them, and China will be raised to 125 due to their insistence on escalation.
Secretary, thank you for doing this. Let me ask you three quick things, if I could. For the sake of clarity, because the markets are open and they're wondering. First of all, Mexico and China, are they part of this 10% universal?
Well, China, no, China.
Mexico and Canada, are they part of the 10%?
Yes.
Okay. Second, given then that you have the rest of the world essentially calling it, it's not China, is this now just all about China?
Well, it's about bad actors, and what we will see is some of the very early countries are China's neighbors. That we're going to see. I'm seeing Vietnam today. Japan's at the front of the queue. South Korea, India. So we will see. And as I've repeatedly said, and President Trump has been saying it for years, China is the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and they are the biggest source of the U.S. trade problems. And indeed, they are problems for the rest of the world, because what we've seen is that as the U.S. announced the tariff wall last week, many of those goods have already started flooding into Europe.
So as you see it now, this trade war is China versus the rest of the world?
Well, I'm not calling it a trade war, but I'm saying that China has escalated, and President Trump responded very courageously to that, and we are going to work on a solution with our trading partners.
And if I could just, excuse me, Raquel, if I could just add to what the Secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here. You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China, when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America, not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them. And that's exactly why more than 75 countries have called, because the United States of America is the best place in the world to do business, and as the President has shown great courage, as the Secretary has said, in choosing to retaliate against China even higher. Elena, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Treasury Secretary Bessent. Can you explain more of the decision-making on what feels like a reversal here? I mean, just these went into effect less than 15 hours ago, these tariffs. Why the pause now? What led to that?
No. Again, President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself, and which tariffs went into effect 15 hours ago? The ones that we have lowered went into effect a week ago. They were announced a week ago, and we've just been overwhelmed by the response from mostly our allies who want to come and negotiate in good faith. So we are expecting them to come with their best deal. As I said a week ago today, don't retaliate, hold your ground, let's see what happens. And China, they kept escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately.
Mr. Secretary,
Go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for doing this. The 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs, is that because of the whiplash that we've been seeing across the financial markets? How much was, what we saw in the stock markets, part of this decision?
No, it's because it's going to, because of a large number of inbounds. We've had more than 75 countries contact us, and I imagine after today there will be more. So it is just a processing problem. Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved. So that's why we're getting the 90-day pause.
Clarification. Secretary, there was a tweet that U.S. Secretary left it when the Oval Office with the president talking about this. Can you talk about what that conversation was like and what you guys said to one another that was
Look, it's all the president's decision, and the president had a level in mind to raise the China tariffs, and then he had the 3-month, essentially the 3-month pause in mind, and we were discussing the exact wording. Sorry? Of course.
It's the president's decision.
It's the president's decision. It was the president's decision to wait until today. And again, as I've said in the past, no one creates leverage for himself like President Trump.
Mr. Secretary.
Shelby, go ahead.
Secretary, what does the president want to see by this, I think it's July 9th deadline to keep things paused? Is it just trade barriers coming down, or is it more than that?
These are trade negotiations, but if countries want to come and offer other things, I talked about yesterday that we are thinking about a big LNG project in Alaska that South Korea, Japan, Taiwan are interested in financing and taking a substantial portion of the offtake. But again, in essence, that is trade because it will decrease the trade deficit that we have with those countries. So everything's on the table.
Raquel, go ahead.
A clarification on the pause. What happened to those countries who just had 10% baseline tariffs, like Brazil and others? Are they still going to have this 90-day pause because you were saying that there will be a tariff of 10% for others? So what happened to those who just had a 10%?
Yeah, that's going to remain.
And do you call this an embargo to China?
Pardon?
You call this an embargo to China, a trade embargo?
I'm not sure what you mean by the word embargo.
125% tariffs, like those, and then it goes 84%. Isn't this an embargo?
Well, it's not. It's China's decision that we have the deficit with them. They sell us almost 5 times what we sell them. So again, I think it's an own goal by China.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Secretary, does this signal that you're confident that you're going to be able to strike a satisfactory deal with all these 75 nations that have approached you?
It signals that President Trump cares about trade and that we want to negotiate in good faith. And as I said, each one of these is going to be a separate, bespoke negotiation. So we are confident that having seen the other side of where this could go, and it was like I said last week, the market didn't understand. Those were maximum levels. The countries can think about those levels as they come to us to bring down their tariffs, their non-tariff trade barriers. We're going to discuss currency manipulation, subsidy of labor, and industry.
Secretary, thank you. Will the pause also apply to the sectoral tariffs that the president has announced, pharma, lumber, anything else?
No, it's on the reciprocal.
So those will still be coming here soon, right?
Mr.
Correct. As far as the negotiations with the 75
Andrea, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, so I want to ask you about what you're doing here. So the market is reacting crazily, right?
I haven't seen it.
Do you think that this move is going to change and calm down the market reaction?
What?
Do you think the markets have tanked, right? There's been a lot of volatility in the market, not just in terms of stock markets, but also in terms of bonds. So will this move, in your mind, do you anticipate this calm the markets again?
Well, I think what we've seen, I think the willingness by more than 75 countries to come and negotiate, I think now the market understands that everything they saw last Wednesday was a ceiling, and now we have a 10% temporary floor, and I think the market, my 35 years in the market, I always wanted certainty, so I think we've got more certainty.
But Mr. Secretary, why do
Maggie, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, why do people assume this is the last word? The president began this morning saying, be cool. 5 hours later, he announces a new policy. Why will investors in the market assume that this is it?
Because, again, as I said, we've given 90 days, and the only certainty we can provide is that the U.S. is going to negotiate in good faith, and we assume that our allies will too. And in terms of certainty, we will see what China does. But what I'm certain of is that what China is doing will affect their economy much more than it will ours, because they have an export-driven, flood the world with cheap export models, and the rest of the world now understands, because when we put up our tariff wall, those exports were already flowing to the rest of the G7 and to the global south.
And you think
Mr. Secretary, how much of this decision was driven by the bond market cratering overnight? What is happening with bonds? Is China selling their bonds?
I have nothing that says that, and we actually had quite a good 10-year auction today, and all this was, again, this was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along, and that, you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors, and we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate. Things will turn out well.
What's your message to America?
Mr. Secretary,
these negotiations with these 75 countries, how long will that take? Will it be a matter of weeks? Will it be a matter of months? Do you expect financial markets to be stable during that time period?
Well, we've started with a 90-day pause, and we will see if more countries turn up, what will happen. But we have a meeting with Vietnam today, and we have one of the largest trade deficits with them, so I'm hoping it will move in a good direction. I was at the Japanese ambassador's house last night for the Cherry Blossom Festival, which was quite festive, and he and I had a good chat. They are going to send a deal team over, so we'll see. These are complicated negotiations. These are imbalances that have taken decades to create, but I think, having seen the maximum level that Donald Trump is willing to go to, President Trump has created this negotiating leverage.